Welcome back, everyone. Now, very few television shows have managed to stay as relevant or appeal to as many generations as The Golden Girls. But as our next guest will tell you, it's what happened behind the scenes of the hit sitcom that will really have you in stitches.
Thank you for being a friend.
It was the tongue-in-cheek comedy ahead of its time. 4 single women over 50 sharing a house in Miami, doling out pearls of wisdom and sassy one-liners.
Stan and I went through a period where we had no marital relations at all. I totally cut off his sex.
You mean it grows back?
The Golden Girls quickly garnered a huge fan base and cemented itself as one of the most loved sitcoms of its time.
Jim Colucci is now revealing what has really happened behind the scenes in his new book, Golden Girls Forever, and we're thrilled to say he joins us now from Hollywood. Hey, Jim.
Hey, how are you? Nice to be here.
We are thrilled to have you, Jim. The Golden Girls. Now, this was a breath of fresh air when it hit TV screens around the world in 1985. So let's go back to where the original idea of the show came from.
Okay. The original idea was such a unique thing, the way this show got on the air, and I don't think it would happen today. Unfortunately, TV networks today are just as ageist as they were back then, but the president of NBC, through a variety of inspirations, had come up with this idea about older women living together, and he was partly inspired by a presentation that Doris Roberts, if you remember her from Remington Steele at the time, and later Everybody Loves Raymond, and Selma Diamond, who had been on Night Court. The two of them had done a network presentation for advertisers and sponsors, and they were so funny talking about Miami Vice but mistaking it for Miami Nice that the network president thought maybe there's really something here.
Were the actresses as good friends off-screen?
Well, they all were, with the exception of Estelle, who I can talk about in a moment, but the other 3 ladies, Rue McClanahan, Betty White, and Bea Arthur, were veterans of television. So they all had crossed paths on many projects before. On the show Maude, Bea Arthur and Rue McClanahan had worked together. Betty White had guest starred. Betty White had worked with others in other shows like The Mary Tyler Moore Show. And so they really all had such links in common that they really knew each other's styles in and out. Estelle Getty was the real surprise and the real find, though, because she had no television experience, and she had really made her name only later in life by appearing in a play called Torch Song Trilogy in New York, which then toured to Los Angeles. And she really just had the chutzpah to get herself in there and get an audition for Sophia, and she wowed them from moment one. So she was the newcomer who bonded with all the rest, and everyone loved Estelle.
Well, speaking of the cast, it's hard to imagine anyone but Betty White playing the character of Rose. But it's true that she was almost cast as Blanche, and then Rue McClanahan was Rose.
Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
To think that it could have gone the other way. And I wonder if it would have worked that way. You know, those actresses were so talented that maybe it would have. But yes, the original concept was that because Betty White was well known from the Mary Tyler Moore Show for playing this man-hungry character, Sue Ann Nivens, and Rue McClanahan was better known for some mousier characters, like she played Vivian on Maude. And they thought, well, let's continue that. That was the obvious thought from the beginning. But it's to the credit of the director of the pilot, who had been a longtime Mary Tyler Moore Show director, Jay Sandrich, that when Rue came in to do her first reading of the script as Rose, he said to her, and I love the quote, he said, "You're really good, but I don't believe for one moment that you're innocent. Will you go in the other room and try Blanche?" And Rue had, in her heart of hearts, had her heart set on Blanche and had been told she couldn't be Blanche. So when he suggested it, she said, "I sure can." And they convinced Betty to switch as well, and history was made.
Jim, it wasn't always a barrel of laughs on set, though, was it? Is it true that Bea Arthur threatened to quit at one point?
She threatened to quit on several occasions, and it's interesting because Bea was a complicated person, as I learned from meeting her and spending time with her, and from all the people who spoke to me about her. Bea was she was not at all what you think she would be from her outer persona, her outer demeanor. Everybody thought, because she was tall and imposing, that she would be tough as nails. And really, although she had that exterior, the irony is she was so vulnerable on the inside and such a mushball and so sweet and nice to people and really a soft touch. But she was also easily hurt and easily insulted. And I think that some of the times that she threatened that she didn't want to be on the show anymore were a result of what they came to call on the show and they stopped doing, Dorothy bashing. And if you remember in the early days of
Yeah.
the show, they would call Dorothy big and ugly and say she looked like Buddy Ebsen and say she looked like all these male actors, Fess Parker. And the thing is, when you're Betty White and they call Rose stupid, you don't take that to heart because you know Betty White is anything but stupid. And the same thing with a character who gets called a slut or a character who gets called old because Estelle was in age makeup. She wasn't even old. But when you're an actress and your character is called ugly over and over, it gets to you, especially if you're a vulnerable person like Bea.
Yeah, Bea was a real sweetheart. The cast also had some bizarre on-set requests during the show's run. Now, we hear Rue McClanahan had a kind of an ingenious clause written into a contract. What was it?
Rue McClanahan was a clothes horse. And one of the things the show's costume designer had told me, which I guess we kind of all know, is that sometimes there aren't great choices of wardrobe for older ladies, and there weren't in the 80s either. And so the idea that Bea and Rue had this talented designer creating custom designed, sexy, beautiful looks for them, Rue was like, I'm taking that home. So that was her,
Do you know what,
her
Jim?
ingenious move.
David has the same clause in his contract.
Sounds like a great book, Golden Girls Forever. An unauthorised look behind the lanai is now available from booktopia.com.au. Jim, great to see you. Let's talk to you again sometime.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you both so much.